everybody. Welcome to the second week of Jewels in the Wasteland here at the AFS Cinema. Now this is going to roll on into the depths of winter. So there'll be this much snow on the ground and we'll still be doing this. So happy to see all of you. Obviously, our host and programmer, Richard Linklater, is going to be up in a minute to introduce it. But first wanted to thank all of you for being here. Many of you are AFS members. Maybe some of you aren't, but you should consider becoming AFS members because what you're helping to support is not just everything that we're doing here and all the screenings that we have and all these wonderful programs, but also artist services and education and many other wonderful things. So support AFS and be a part of this wonderful thing that's happening in our community that doesn't happen most places. It's because people like you guys help support it. Also want to really, really thank a man named Wayne in Elgin. So when we brought in, we're bringing in prints for all of these, 35 millimeter prints. And the 35 millimeter print for this, we started getting these urgent alerts from the studio saying, yeah, it seems to have fallen off the FedEx radar. So FedEx was shipping it in, and we don't know what happened to it. It just seems to have disappeared, and they can't find it on the truck and all of this. And then a couple of days, and we're freaking out. We're like, send us your B print. We don't care how it looks. Just send it over. And so then we're kind of waiting it out, and we start getting these phone calls from a man with a very heavy East Texas accent. And we gathered his name was Wayne. And what Wayne was telling us, that it took us 3 or 4 phone calls to get. We're very grateful to this man. I'm not making fun of him. But it was hard for us to get on the phone from, maybe he was on his cell phone or something, I'm guessing. I don't know. But what he was trying to say was that the FedEx truck had gone around a curve, and the print had fallen off into his yard. So if it weren't for Wayne walking out to his yard, finding the box, we'd be watching a poor grade print instead of a fair grade print. An American hero. Thank you. Speaking of American heroes, I'd like to bring to the stage right now AFS founder, artistic director, programmer of this series, a guy who's, I will not say that his introduction will be mind-blowing because he hates it when I say that, but it'll be real good, Mr. Richard Linklater.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you guys for being here. You know, as you were telling that about a print falling off a truck, I was just kind of soaking it in. Someday in all of our lifetimes, there will be no such, we hope we'll be throwing the last print ever, but this is less and less opportunities in the world for prints to fall off trucks in this digital era. But that's why we're here, watching 35 millimeter prints in this wonderful theater all together. That's what we're doing here. So, colors. Well, I think it's pretty clear that Dennis Hopper wins my 80s award for the most representation. I wouldn't have really predicted that at the very beginning, the first series, but it just sort of happened. As an actor, he's in, Rumblefish and Blue Velvet. He's the only director who has 2 films. But I think it's indicative. You know, we showed Out of the Blue early on. That was his film from the early 80s he did in Canada. And Hopper, you have to understand, was like persona non grata in Hollywood. He couldn't get hired. Until he got sober, a little bit, after 83, 84, he was really out. Even though he'd been in Apocalypse Now, he was just out as both an actor and certainly as a director. He had burned those bridges long before. After the success of E.T. Rider, of course, in '69, he made the last movie, and he just always had a way of pissing off everybody, and so he was out. So this movie, I think, kind of tells a 80s tale. A lot of the 80s, it was hard for filmmakers to get their films made. Difficult time. The business was changing quite a bit. But this is unlike last week's film, very independent film. This is a totally studio effort, and it was Hopper kind of coming back, I think, after he had success, with Blue Velvet, and then Hoosiers, was a big hit. So as an actor, I think he was just back around in a big way, and I think he was ready to make another movie. There was this script floating around. It was a cop movie set in Chicago. Something about cough syrup was the was the problem. he said, well, yeah, he liked that relationship between the two officers, but he totally reworked it for where he lived. And, he lives in Venice, California, or he did for a long time. And he kind of knew this phenomenon that was happening. It was a huge gang problems where, from a street level, there were more and more gang-related deaths, like 300-400 a year was happening. And there were these rival factions, and he really got into that. The screenwriter he was working with, Michael Schiffer, went and interviewed a bunch of gang people, hung out with them, really tried to get the language. So, I kind of made a glib comment last week. I said, oh, it's Hollywood, there's this phenomenon. But I actually looked it up because I was curious. I was like, was that what it was? But actually, NWA, Straight Outta Compton, hadn't come out. That was coming up later in the year. This film really is early. It's one of the first films of its kind, I think, in a gang. And what a lethal, brutal, this ain't no switchblade knife, gangs. These guys got Uzis. It's really bleak. It's scary. And it's this full-blown studio film. So I think it's Hopper having it both ways. He makes and the film was a big hit, I think because it was kind of exciting subject matter. The country was interested in this phenomenon, and it's well done, obviously. So, but I think he kind of has it both ways, because the film, I would say almost similar to last week's film, Drugstore Cowboy, it doesn't really preach. He doesn't really take sides. I think he made a commercial film, but then the film itself, as I remember, and I haven't seen it, I remember watching it twice when it came out, and I haven't really seen it since, but I held it in high regard for a number of reasons, but I think it's the tone, the kind of grit of it. It's that sunlight. He worked with the famous cinematographer, Haskell Wexler, and the look of it is very just kind of sunlight, but menacing and gritty. These are real locations. They're shooting in South Central, and supposedly there are a lot of actual gang members in the film, and I think someone said 10 people died making it, but I don't believe that. I think he said that on the promotion trip. So, in the tone of the story, it's really just a character piece about these two police officers, and then it's a real effort to get inside these gangs, I think, in their way, and at least understand these guys. You get the sense of what drives this, but it doesn't have that finger-wagging Hollywood, like, oh, it's not necessarily cautionary. It's just kind of laying it out for you. I don't remember it being too preachy and it's not actually hopeful either. It doesn't give you that. It doesn't resolve itself so nicely, and it's just kind of a fucked up world that was only going to get worse. Sean Penn's character in this, he plays this young kind of hothead, very adrenaline-driven officer, kind of the kind that the LAPD, everyone in LA would grow to hate this kind of officer who just comes in and gives everybody a hard time, and is just really kind of malicious guy. Because he's cleaning the streets. He's a vengeful, I don't know, his own version of some, Clint Eastwood crazy character who's just, he's on a path, his version of policing. And Robert Duvall, his older partner, near retirement, he's probably the version of community policing, where he kind of knows the guys and he has a rapport, and his theories are a little more friendly and treat them as humans. So that's the conflict between them, and both those actors are really interesting phases of their lives. I think that's what, as I remember, carries the movie. I remember looking at Duvall. He had a great '80s. He was 1 year away from Lonesome Dove. He had done. Obviously, he had been in Tender Mercies just a few years before. He got a lot of acclaim for that part. And, he's, a guy, middle-aged actor, but he's at the top of his game. And then Sean Penn, we're still dealing with a young Sean Penn. He had kind of been around the entire 80s. I think people first saw him in, Taps and Fast Times. But he had played some kind of tough guys. Do you remember the first Bad Boys? Not the next, the less comedic Bad Boys. He had been in that one, so he was kind of in his tough guy phase. But if you know his politics, he couldn't be farther from the character he plays here. But this was a hothead phase for him, and I think he got a lot of publicity in this era. For those of you who weren't around, he was a controversial figure because he was, he could go to jail. He punched a guy on, I think it was an extra on this film, was taking pictures of him, so he punched him out. But that always sounded belligerent, but I thought, oh, well, Sean's the guy who's always in character. You know, he's one of those actors who's just, you got to call him by his name. And I think he just, in character, probably punched, you know, playing the guy he was. I don't know. Maybe I'm making an excuse for him. I kind of love Sean Penn no matter what. But but no, his reputation, I don't know if was he still married to Madonna at this time? I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But he was doing jail time. He was that bad boy, literally bad boy actor. And he's great in this. So it's, you know, still kind of a youngish Sean Penn. But look throughout the film. This film, I didn't know at the time, and I haven't seen this film knowing who this actor is. But Rocket, you'll see the head, I don't know if I think he's a Crip, is Don Cheadle. Young Don Cheadle is just the baddest guy in this movie. There's, I think, young Mario Lopez is one of the, there's like a Barrio gang and the Crips and the Bloods, and it's all kind of coming to a head. But look closely, there's little cute Mario in there. Damon Wayans, I think he plays the guy who, I didn't know who any of these guys were at the time, you know, but look for him. It's a great cast. And yeah, just a really wonderful movie. After it, I don't want to get too far ahead of it because the criticisms of the movie I think are interesting talking about after, but I don't want to kind of make you think of those during the movie. Why don't we just all watch it straight up, and then after we can talk about, you know, what the criticisms of it was at the time and a little bit later. So and the Ice-T song is great, as I remember. I don't know. So, okay, enjoy this movie, and Lars and I will be up here after, so thanks a lot.
All right. Real special thanks to Wayne, by the way, because that was a beautiful print.
Yeah, that was the real deal, man. That print it's 1988 all over again, man. That was beautiful.
Yeah, shot by Haskell Wexler.
Gritty.
And you really get a sense from Hopper, I think, because he was a photographer.
Yeah.
Real good idea of his frame, and it's a beautifully composed film.
Yeah, I just think it's really excellent, and it's just the tone of it. So, you know, 80s was the era of the perfect formula. It's really subversive to be a studio film, big studio film. I just think, you know, I was saying in the intro, he was kind of on the comeback. But I remember reading an interview with him at the time, and, you know, he had that horrible reputation as being difficult and all that. He had a notorious showdown with Henry Hathaway, I guess on True Grit or some movie in the 60s that more or less ended his Hollywood career. He just had a standoff with a director, an old school Hollywood director, and he was the young guy. You know, this is only a year or two before he did Easy Rider. And, you know, they just sat there all day doing 50 takes until Hopper wouldn't do what the director said, and just ruined his reputation. And around this time, I remember reading an interview, and he says, you know, Hathaway was right. You know, he was kind of atoning, or, you know, about, he just had a different attitude toward it. But I think he was just, you know, knowing Hopper, he was just kind of saying the right things and doing the right things, being a good boy. You have to do in Hollywood a little bit. And then he makes this movie. It's not really I don't know. I'm surprised at how little formula it has. I mean, it has, you know, it delivers the goods. It's got a car chase. It's got good action sequences. It's got just enough gratuitous sex. You know, it's delivering that. But other than that, it's just, I think Hopper just loved the reality of it. It's just this, you know, hanging out. He lets scenes play long. He just kind of really likes these people. He wants you to just be in this world. And I think it's really successful on that level. Yeah.
It was really successful at the box office too. For people who don't know, I mean, this was
Yeah,
I looked up how
hit.
much it made. It made, I think, $46 million in '88, which is the equivalent of $100 million gross
It
now.
was a big hit. I remember. I was like, all right, Dennis is back.
But this is at a period where if you thought of Dennis Hopper, you thought of him on screen, and you thought of some of these pretty crazy parts that he was playing.
I
But
know.
he wasn't that guy in real life.
No, and he you know, went on. I think his acting career probably was better from this point on. The success of this, to be honest, I was a little disappointed when his next directorial film, which he made around here. I don't know if anyone here remembers
The
the
Hot
Hot Spot. He was in town with Don Johnson. Who was around? Jennifer Connelly was in that. And I remember thinking that was going to be. I remember going, it's, you know, I think he had gone another, you know, I don't know. I remember being a little disappointed in that.
Great
And that was-
soundtrack, though.
And you know, I don't remember the soundtrack.
Right?
I don't
I
know
mean,
why.
come on.
Is the Hot Spots a great soundtrack?
Yeah, it was like Taj Mahal and Miles
Okay.
Davis playing together. It's good.
Yeah, I just remember watching the movie. Go, what's this about? What's this even? I don't know. I was disappointed in it, but he did a couple more movies too. But I think he just his acting career continued. You know, Speed. He played more and more. And then by the end there, he's doing those, what were they? Like Ameriprise commercial, retirement commercials. I don't know. Hopper he was crazy in the best way. I love the cameos. You know, there's Seymour. I don't even know if they're cameos. He's given old actor
Yeah.
buddies jobs, probably. There's Jack Nance, you know, Eraserhead. There's Seymour Cassell. I love Cy Richardson. He has a more substantial part.
Playing the sheriff's man.
It's great who shows up. And I kind of love these characters. I forgot how much I liked High Top. That guy, Glenn Plummer, he's very good. And isn't Cheadle a bad? I mean,
Oh, he's great.
What a
so much
presence.
Yeah.
You know, you think. I remember at the time going, God, who's this guy? You know, I didn't even. You know, you wouldn't think like, oh. You know, that guy had just been out of Cal Arts for a year, classically trained actor. But that's what it was like as a young African American actor. You had to do the Hollywood shuffle. You know, if you know that Robert Townsend film, it's like, oh, you're going to play a gang member. You're going to play a, you know, it's a longer path, obviously. But he broke out. It was what, the mid '90s. What year was Devil in a Blue Dress? You know, that was the first one. Everybody goes, "Who's that guy?" You know, but he's had a nice career since. But I have high respect for him. I think he challenges Sean for one of the better actors of that generation.
And then you have Damon Wayans really winning the
As
"Is
the
that how you're
crackhead.
going to play it?" award.
I love that crackhead Damon Wayans. That scene with that bunny in the store, whatever.
How many directors would say, yeah, go with that?
Or that you could have easily just kind of cut that out of the movie and not missed it. my editor Sandra is here tonight. Would we have cut that scene? I don't know. It probably would have been gone.
She says it's out of
Sandra's
there.
brother Bob is actually Robert Estrin is the editor of this movie. I asked her for some good stories, but she didn't really have any. She was down the hall editing a. What's the name of that movie, Sandra? Oh yeah, a Rip Torn, crazy movie.
So I wonder if we have any questions or contributions from our audience.
Yeah.
Right back here, yeah.
I don't know. So you mentioned criticism earlier. And just to venture a guess, was some of the criticism maybe the humping the bunny scene, or was it the Alonzo character having like a hard-hood edge? What was the criticism specifically?
I think they thought the Alonzo, and I don't really share it. I think that relationship, they said, oh, she's underdeveloped or that doesn't go anywhere, but it kind of does in a way, I think. I mean, it's not a big part, but, I really like that scene where they're back at his house and she's watching him push the kid. You can't help but think what she's thinking there for that brief moment, but you realize it's impossible there. I don't know. I doubt there's a lot more that they cut out or anything. I mean, that was obviously never going to be the focus of the movie, but I don't know. I don't really criticize it there. The criticism I remember hearing, and I think it's what really motivated and the legacy of this movie, is it really kicked off more, kind of gang-related movies done by young African-American directors. I think they looked at this and said, well, that's real, but, it's about two white guys. It's made by white guys. It's a studio film. And I think they kind of doubled down pretty soon. A couple years later, you have Boys in the Hood, and then another couple years, Menace to Society. I think they all saw this and say, I got my own version of this. That'll be even more real. But I don't know. Are they, is Boys in the Hood any more real than this?
As a criticism, this kicked off a lot more good movies. That's a criticism I think you accept,
Yeah, it's not a criticism. Just at the time,
Yeah.
even John Singleton himself was kind of criticizing. Well, it's about, but it's the kind of how Hollywood has always done it. They lead the American audience in via identifiable people. Oh, two white guys. I think if it had been about two African American cops, and they had to. It was a step thing to get there. And a little bit later, you got even major studios are doing Training Day and a lot of. It's a full blown genre, and it goes with the music too. I think after this, you got little white kids in the burbs of Ohio wearing those it was off to the races as a fashion-y kind of thing. Everybody calling each other Holmes and stuff. That would be the drinking game for this. If you had to take a drink every time someone said Holmes, we'd all be really plastered now.
So we wouldn't be talking with
Yeah.
such concision and grace. I wonder if anybody else has a question or contribution from the audience here. Right over here, yeah.
It's fresh in my mind. I watched it for the first time this summer, but Hill Street Blues was a series that I noticed a lot of similarities, and even to The Actor Played Frog was a series.
Right. Is that Farina?
I wonder if that show obviously had an influence on this, and how much too of this was much more violent than like a sitcom primetime show.
Because that was going on these years, right? Hill Street Blues was, had a good, Is that a question? I don't know. It's a comment. Yeah, TV always.
Wanted to take an opportunity to show more violence at a show like that.
Yeah, I think a feature film you kind of have to deliver. You have the production, you have a budget. You can do those chase sequences. You can have. I think that's pretty amazing when High Top comes flying through the window. That's that extended chase sequence, motorcycle, fly through the window, fight scene. That just keeps going. It's pretty impressive actually, and it's kind of real. Duvall and Sean Penn kind of brought that. You can tell they were encouraged to just be. There were definitely some bruises and bad feelings after that fight. They really, it's sort of staged, but you can't stage that completely.
Mm-hmm.
They're throwing each other around, and I don't know. Such a brutal movie, but it had that kind of real edge to it. So
I really like the part where Sean Penn's driving and we see down the alley as he's going. You see down the other alley and they're timing it and it's going across and it's an unbroken take. That really gets you into the suspense of the moment. Good chase scene, great chase scene, great fight
chase
scene.
scenes, but but again, it doesn't. It's just you're hanging out with these guys. It's one thing. I mean, it's building up to who shot the guy at the beginning, creates a raid situation. They're after Rocket, kind of, but the other gang gets to him first. It's such a grim last scene when Larry and Rocket have that moment. It reminds me of like the last bit of Wild Bunch or something. They're just kind of on their own little parallel suicide missions and just, I don't know.
And that's that shot where they rise up. That's kind of become a cliche, sort of, to do the no.
Yeah.
It's kind of become a cliche, but it wasn't really a cliche at the time, I don't think.
I don't think so. It's a really good, it's a bold choice. I think that's a pretty great dying scene when Duvall's slowly dying, what he's saying under his breath, and to be lit by helicopter overhead, really bright light. It's just like, it's memorable.
That's kind of also one of those scenes that's a big actor scene, a dying scene, and you can see Hopper really putting a lot of emphasis on that as an actor turns director.
Yeah, but he really underplays it. We've all seen horrible dying scenes, and that was like, Duvall kind of can't do that. He had to play it. He's going to make that believable.
I saw a hand all the way in the back.
Yeah, I have a question, comment. Maybe your editor, since she's here, could speak about the editing. I thought it was really effective for the whole tone of the movie, for me as a viewer. I'm not an editor, I'm an actor, so I don't know anything about editing, but it just, watching the movie, the way it was cut, it seemed like it makes each individual scene, for me, really powerful. And then the movie as a whole, it kind of, it wasn't an upbeat movie, that's for goddamn sure, but it made the overall thing just really, it worked for me, I think, a lot because of the editing.
I think so too. It's just a well put together movie. Well, all those things, shot, edited, acted. Movies kind of work as a whole. But I think it certainly does. I think they achieve what they set out to do. You can feel that.
Yeah. Anybody else we have in the audience? Right back here. Yeah.
I was curious, was there any kind of response from the gangs involved in this film? Because it kind of seemed like it favored the Bloods.
I think there were some shootings in theaters, if I remember. Does anybody remember correctly? Do you remember? There was a violence. They had to pull the film from certain theaters. There was a shooting. There was a shooting at a gang-related funeral. That seems a little over the top. It really happened. that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think one of the big criticisms is it just glorifies violence. I don't think it glorifies it. It certainly depicts it, but I don't know. It kind of explains, to me, the saddest scene is when the young guy joins and they all beat the hell out of me. You realize, oh shit, this is, I mean, that's what it's supposed to mean, but it's still kind of tough to watch.
And violence itself is part of the appeal of the film. There's no denying it.
Yeah, it's a visceral thrill, and yet it's cinema's deal with the public. Like, it's always been that way. Bad guys, violence, and cinema just go hand in hand so well, So
It's one of the things cinema does best is violence,
I know.
whether we like it or not.
yeah.
Right over here.
There's a pretty eloquent statement of the values of the gang, that it's their only family
Yeah.
from the young guy. I felt like that was pretty believable,
Yeah, that felt true. And even the scene where it's kind of the community organizer, the guy who's come in and he's trying to, and the parents, the adults in the neighborhood are, that gets really contentious, and that felt kind of real too. It's like you just feel like, what the hell can we do? What's causing this? What, the funeral. It's just it lays it all out there, but I don't think it didn't have a preachy tone. So that's what I always appreciated about the movie. I said, oh, they're not like trying to correct all these ills in one movie, which Hollywood likes to do a lot. So I kind of applaud them not trying, just lay it out there. And it certainly hasn't gotten any better. It got worse. The 90s were really horrible. LAPD, say no more.
I'm so interested in watching this. I just spent the whole movie thinking about this Hopper that I think I know, and who Hopper really was, and what Hopper's style was, what his personal style, what his values were. Kind of when you, the more that you know about a director, the more you kind of think about like where he was coming from. Did you ever meet Hopper?
Yeah.
What was he like?
I was around him a few times before I actually met him. I remember in 1990 at the USA Film Festival in Dallas, he was, forget what he was doing there exactly. Did he have a film? Remember he had a new wife and a little baby. He seemed really happy. And, he was the kind of guy who would say, just in mid-conversation, boy, it's great to be alive. He was just kind of one of those survivor guys who was just, damn, I'm good,
And he was sincere in his joy. It wasn't just a gag line.
Yeah, no, he meant it. Yeah, he meant it. He meant it. A guy who had lived through a lot, He started so young, he was a famous, he was a teen actor. He's in Rebel Without a Cause and Giant. But I'm always struck by his just pure artistic curiosity and intensity. And, I've worked with Lawrence Fishburne this last year. And he really got, Hopper's like an uncle to him. They did Apocalypse Now together for a couple years. They were in the Philippines. And he said he was really one of the most influential. And that was when he was kind of off, he was out there. But he said he just, what a great guy he was to spend those couple years. But I only really hung out with him one night in camp. But I told this story before. How many of
And you guys all heard the story, yeah.
I don't want to be the guy who has the story he tells over and over and over. I really don't. I don't want to be that guy.
So some of you have heard the story. Some of you maybe
But
haven't heard the story. Should we
No,
tell the story?
No, it's a pretty
Okay,
good story.
all right.
Well, no, I've around him, but my story of him in person, and I was talking, it's great to be alive, sober Hopper. Well, that comes with an asterisk, because he was there in Cannes. We were on a beach in Cannes, just hanging out, and at night, he and my British producer Jeremy Thomas were smoking a joint, and I asked him. He was there with a new Wim Wenders film, and he had worked with Wenders in the '70s, American Friend, 76, 7, and there he was in whatever that was, 06, working with Wenders again. I asked him, well, what's it like now? What's it? All these years later, what's it like getting back with Wenders and working? And he said, yeah, it's really different now. And I'm sober now. And he hands the joint, I was like, okay, his definition of sobriety was what it was. That was fun. But I told him how much I liked his films as a director. I think everyone just knew him. You know how it is when you're sort of famous for a few things. You appreciate the people who like you for the more obscure things you're actually more proud of. And I fell into that category. I was like, hey, I talked to him about certain movies and things like that. And I told him, I got to tell him in person, I'm really glad I did, that I was at he had a famous incident in '83 in Houston where he kind of blew himself up, or he was doing this stunt out at a racetrack. They were having a retrospective in Rice, and here's where he was still off the deep end. He was, this was the last time he wasn't sober. He got hauled off after this event, but they were having a retrospective, and I showed up on the last night. It was Dennis Hopper in person, and then he wasn't actually in the room. He was showing this crazy video. He was in another room on a closed circuit camera, just acting really strange. And the thing he was showing was so annoying. It was really loud. It was like cut up video, outtakes, Reagan bloopers. It was just so strange that he kind of alienated the entire audience. There was like 400 people there. But then about 45 minutes or an hour later, with him not there was about 20 of us left. And he was hinting at this party. He was kind of going, and then we're going to go party later. And I was like, whatever, 22 years old. I was going like, well, I don't have anything else to do. I'll just hang around and see what he's talking about or what's going to happen. Had I had anything else in my life going on, I would have been out of there too. But I was just there. And sure enough, the ones who were left, they said, oh, we're getting on these buses. We're going to North Houston. This is at the Rice Media Center, and there's this racetrack. Dennis is going to go, do this stunt. And we're like, what? So anyway, the freaks from Rice University and myself, we jumped on this bus, went out there, and sure enough, in between the destruction derby and the whatever goes on at this North Houston racetrack, they kind of call a timeout. The cars go to the side. They set up all this ring of dynamite. Hopper gets in the middle of it. Vim Vendors is walking around taking pictures. I remember talking to him a little bit. Everybody's kind of calm, like, what the hell is going to happen? And he did this kind of famous stunt. It's real and really dangerous because if all the dynamite goes at the same time, it creates a vacuum and you can just walk away. But if one stick or something goes wrong, it blows you to bits. So I guess he thought that was a fun thing to do. So, yeah, there was this huge explosion and big puff of smoke. And you can find this on YouTube. Years later, someone was shooting some video or something, and it's around there. But, yeah, I was there. And big, huge explosion. And, he walks away just like, he was like, yeah. He was just intense as hell. I remember this whole kind of redneck dude standing next to me. The best line of the night, he's like, because these guys are wondering, these people at the racetrack, they're like, what the hell's going on? And one guy goes, oh, that's that old boy got shot off that motorcycle on Easy Rider. It's like, I'm like, yeah. Anyway, crazy night. But that was just like, okay. But years later, it was like, oh, you read about him, and he says, oh, that's the night his friends did an intervention. After that, took him to rehab, and he got sober. So that's his last night of, like, non-sobriety, apparently. But I was so happy to be able to tell him, hey, I was there. I was there.
Can you imagine being at such an exalted state of fucked upness that you have to go that far before your friends are like, okay, that's enough?
Yeah, you have to. But he had invited him. Terry Southern was there, the writer, because they were sort of, at that very moment, they were working on perhaps a sequel to Easy Rider, believe it or not. Even though they died at the end, they get resurrected. Again, they were out there. But
yeah, there was actually like a whole crazy treatment for that.
Yeah.
That was a sci-fi treatment. Yeah.
Yeah, they were talking about it. They were pretty serious.
But then that intervention came in, and that never happened.
Yeah. And then shortly there, I think his first sober film, he was here in Austin. He liked Austin. He was always around. But he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Which is great, by the way.
Yeah, so he's good in that, yeah. So, yeah, crazy guy, man. Sad he thought he was going to go forever, one of those guys. But
He had a good run. He had
Yeah,
some
yeah,
good work.
and he's the guy who lived every minute. You know, I don't know if have you seen this documentary made by Kit Carson, American Dreamer?
Yeah, we
Is that-
showed it here a couple times.
Yeah, it's a moment, you know, a window in his life at that time. He's kind of playing the role of Dennis Hopper, crazy person, I think.
He sort of hijacks the documentary a little bit. It's about him
Yeah.
editing the last movie,
Right.
and he's kind of
living
begins
in New
to.
Mexico. But he's, I don't know,
It's really good. You should check it out if you
Yeah.
haven't seen it.
definitely interesting. I kind of feel sorry for him in it. He's pretty.
Jules in the Wasteland. This is the 80s. But Maggie's Hopper, he did tonal shift and did colors, which I think.
Not colors, but
Colors, but chasers.
Chasers.
right.
He's total tonal shifts. And so he had legs after this, and did different things after this.
Well, he directed 2 more movies. I mean, 3 more. Hotspot, Chasers, and I didn't see it. I didn't see a couple of them, you know, for whatever reason. But
This was really powerful, and I'm really glad we did.
yeah, I think it's his apex of like, you know, in the industry as far as because he was really. I mean, everybody would say Easy Rider, you know, but that was a '60s biker movie that hit big. You know, this was like up with the. Yeah.
Yeah, you had
Yeah.
catering trucks, and it was a real movie. You
It's
like
a
do the
real
whole
movie.
thing.
They got to pay all these people. But you know, I think he always was a guy with his ear to the ground. You know, even though at this point he's, you know, whatever. He's not young anymore. He's in his mid to late 50s probably. But he's, or I don't know, somewhere in his 50s. But he's so curious. You know, the guy was so like art and everything. He was so excited about everything always. So.
So next week we have a movie that we were talking earlier, and you were talking about. Yeah, I was going through my 10 favorite Woodies. So this is one that's right up there for you. It's Woody Allen's Another Woman.
Yeah, I think certain directors you want to, especially the ones who had good decades. And Woody Allen certainly did. And I just wanted to pick one. I mean, I'm just assuming everyone's seen, you know, certain Woody Allen films of the era, but I thought one of the lesser represented ones was Another Woman, and just how great Jenna Rollins is in it. So, and it's more of the, you know, if you divide Woody into like his comedies, and then his kind of Bergman-esque, it's probably a little more in that category. But it's much more. It's got a lot more going on. I don't know, more going on. It's got a certain buoyancy that I think Interiors doesn't. Certain kind of, I don't know, characters more clearly drawn or something. But it's a really beautiful performance by her and everybody. You know, it's. I just think it's a pretty great movie. Haven't seen it lately, but you know, it's one of those. Woody's made so many good films that it's one of those that I think it's not in anyone's top 10 or even 20 of his. It's for kind of a Martha Plimpton, a young Martha Plimpton's in it. And I ran into her once, or I know her a little bit, but I just told her, like, hey, you know, I really like you in Another Woman. She was like, oh, thank you. No one ever even talks about that movie. That's how actors, you often feel about your own work sometimes. But yeah, I think it's just one of those underrated only because it's next to so many other good films. You know, when it's in that category. You know, Crimes and Misdemeanors is the next year, and you know, he was on quite a role. So. You know, he had to be represented in here somewhere. It was hard. There's so many films, you know, even thinking about, you know, I'd love to have shown another Scorsese, you know, but we've all seen them.
And we can always go back and start all over again with the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this one was, you know, a certain kind of movie, L.A. I don't know, just wanted to get that in there. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming, guys. See you
Thanks,
next
everybody.
week. All right.
Thanks, Rick. And we'll see everybody here next week for Woody Allen's Another Woman.